Hello everyone, my name is Jennifer and welcome to Best Kept Plans. Today's video is going to be a reading recap for March 2026. If you're interested in hearing all about the books that I read last month, please stick around. I am so excited to be filming this March 2026 reading recap. I had one of the best reading months I have ever had in March 2026, and I cannot wait to talk with you all about the books that I read last month. I will be referencing my Archer and Olive reading journal. This is where I keep track of all of the books that I read every month. And I realized that the last few months I have neglected to share my monthly stats with you all. So I thought I would quickly go through my March 2026 stats. I read 8 books in the month of March. None of them were fully physically or fully digitally. I did read 1 book completely on audio, and then the other 7 were a combination of physical or digital plus audio. I read a total of 3,810 pages, which is about 1,000 more pages than I read in February or March of this year. My average rating was 4.5 stars, which is very high, and all 8 books that I read were on my physical TBR. I did not read any books that were ARCs or ALCs in the month of March. Also, I did not get to all of the books on my March 2026 TBR, and that's okay. I wanted to mood read through the month of March, and I absolutely did, and I'm so glad that I did. The first book that we're going to talk about is one that was actually on my TBR for March, and that is Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinniman. This is the first book in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series. I have been hearing about this everywhere and have been very eager to pick this up and give this a read, and I have to tell you, it does not disappoint. If you have not picked up this series yet, I highly recommend it. I absolutely loved book 1. I thought it was such an interesting introduction to these characters, to this world. I love our main characters. I think their dynamic is so great. Their personalities just feel so vibrant and so specific, and I love that. And there's nothing but nonstop action in here, which is very exciting. I ended up giving this 4.5 out of 5 stars and definitely wanted to continue on with the series after reading this book. The second book that I picked up in March 2026 was also on my TBR, and that is Brimstone by Callie Hart. This is the second book in the, I believe it's called the Fae and Alchemy series. The first book in the series is Quicksilver, which I read, I believe, in February, and it ends off on a really interesting note. So I was very excited to pick up Brimstone, and I had a really good time with this. There's a lot of development in this story for our main characters, specifically our female main character. I was really intrigued to see what was going to happen with the romance in this book because our romance leaves off on a really great place, and I was very worried that that was going to be tampered with. But I loved that the romantic storyline was what it was, and it added to the enjoyment of the story on top of all of the mysterious elements that are at play and our main character figuring out who she is and what she is in a deeper way. I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars and will definitely continue on with the series once book 3 is published. The next book that I picked up was the last book that I read from my March 2026 TBR, and that is Don't Let the Forest In by C.G. Drews. This is a young adult horror, which was something new for me, and I really ended up enjoying this. Our story is focused on a main character who is in high school. He goes to boarding school with his twin sister, and he has a very deep friendship with another classmate, but dynamics between him and his sibling and this best friend are a bit at odds this school year, which is new for them and very distressing for our main character. We see his mental status really devolve and change throughout this story. And we're given a glimpse into that through the physical means that the story unfolds through, which is really unique and interesting and had me wanting to continue turning the page to figure out exactly what was going on. There are certainly some shocks, twists in this story. I did anticipate them, but it didn't deter from my enjoyment of this. I found this to be really well written and would really be interested in reading more from this author in the future. I ended up giving this 4.5 out of 5 stars. At this point in the month, I was having such a good time reading, but I could not stop thinking about Dungeon Crawler Carl, and I absolutely needed to pick up the second book in the series, which is Carl's Doomsday Scenario by Matt Dinniman. I absolutely loved this book. I loved that we were really focused on our characters, on their development, on the development of this world, on other entities that come into contact with our main characters and the dynamics that are there. I found this to be really, really well done. And this is a shorter book, probably the shortest, if not one of the shortest books in the series. And I felt like Matt Dinniman really crammed so much in here. It was just done so concisely and it was so enjoyable to read. I ended up giving this 5 stars. This was my first 5-star read of the month, which was really, really exciting. It's also my first 5-star read since January. So I was very happy about that. And after finishing Carl's Doomsday Scenario, I could do nothing else but pick up the next book in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, which is the Dungeon Anarchist Cookbook by Matt Dinniman. Now, I've talked so far about 2 books in this series, but I haven't really explained what this series is about. It is challenging to explain this series, but also I feel like it's almost best to go into these books with as little information as possible. So to just give you a tiny little taste of what's going on, we have a main character, Carl, who is living on Earth in Seattle when a intergalactic entity comes to Earth and basically destroys everything like that. And unfortunately, the vast majority of the population of Earth is destroyed like that. Now, Carl was not, and because he wasn't, he's given the opportunity to go into a dungeon and become a player in a game that is being watched all across the galaxies by billions and trillions and quadrillions of people. And basically, every book in this series is following his adventures throughout these dungeon levels, along with his ex-girlfriend's cat, Princess Donut, and a slew of other people. It's just so entertaining, and I cannot urge you to pick up this series enough. I gave the third book in this series 4.5 out of 5 stars. After reading book 3 in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, I felt like I had to pick up book 4 right away, which is The Gate of the Feral Gods by Matt Dinniman. This book, I would say, is probably my least favorite of the series so far, but I say that while also saying that I absolutely love this book. This book is absolutely incredible. I think for me, this one was a little bit longer and I felt like there was a bit more filler that could have been pulled out to make the story just hit a little bit harder. That being said, I really loved the atmosphere of this book. The level in the dungeon that we're in was really unique and interesting and posed a lot of challenges for our main characters, which I really appreciated. We definitely expanded the world and touched upon some characters, entities, creations that exist in this universe that are definitely going to be big players further on in the series. And I liked that, but I did also think there were bits of that that were challenging to understand and a little bit confusing for the reader. So I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. Again, I still absolutely love this book and I 100% need to continue on in this series. But after book 4, I decided it was time for a little bit of a break in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series. So I did not pick up the next book throughout the rest of the month. After finishing book 4 in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, I was a little bit nervous about what to pick up next. I knew what I wanted to pick up, but the Dungeon Crawler Carl series is sci-fi, and the book I wanted to read was also sci-fi, and I was worried that it was going to be too much of that genre. But I decided to go for it anyways, and I'm so happy that I did. I ended up picking up Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, and this book is absolutely incredible. I had so much fun reading this, and it made me so excited for what I could find if I explore the sci-fi genre a little bit more. I loved our main characters in this book. I thought the story itself was really interesting, with our male main character basically being put into a really awful and horrifying situation where he's alone. He is aware that his future is looking pretty bleak, but he has this intense feeling of responsibility to do whatever he can to save people on Earth from an equally, if not worse, fate than what he has in store for him. We end up exploring a really incredible dynamic between living beings. We are experiencing the development of an incredible friendship. And yes, there's a lot of science and a lot of math in this book, but I didn't find it to be too overwhelming. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. This is my favorite book that I read in March. This is my favorite book that I have read so far this year. If you have not picked up Project Hail Mary, please do. It is absolutely incredible. And I did go see the movie after I finished this, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And the last book that I ended up picking up in March 2026 was The Book That Held Her Heart by Mark Lawrence, which is the third and final book in the library trilogy. I read book 1 early in 2025 and book 2 earlier this year. And this book finally came out in paperback in March, and I knew I wanted to pick it up right away and wanted to get to it as quickly as possible because I really enjoyed the first 2 books in the series and was curious to see how this was going to end. I will say this was my least favorite book in the series. I do feel like we got a bit lost in the shuffle in this one. We're following 2 main characters, but a bunch of other side characters throughout this series, and they're basically all involved with this large library that is a character in and of itself. It has almost a sentience to it that allows it to be selective in who it allows into certain areas of the library, who is allowed to access certain information. And in this one, we spend the least amount of time in the library. And I think that's why this story for me didn't hit as well as the first 2 in the series. We have our main characters realizing that the library itself is in trouble because of a story put together by one of our main characters. And while I found it interesting seeing these characters navigate these fictional but not so fictional worlds, I just felt like it would have been a more interesting story, a story that was more connected to the other books in the series if we would have remained in our library setting and maybe kept the story a little bit smaller. So I liked this. I did. I don't know that I can say it was the most satisfying conclusion to the series, but I did enjoy this book. I do think the writing is quite good, and I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. And that is it for the books that I read in March 2026. It's wild to think that my lowest rated book in the month of March was still 4 out of 5 stars. That to me is awesome. Before we go, I wanted to share my top 3 for the month of March, starting with book 3, which is Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinniman. I thought this was a fantastic start to a series. The book in the number 2 spot is going to be Carl's Doomsday Scenario by Matt Dinniman. Definitely my favorite in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series so far. And as I mentioned earlier, my favorite book that I read in March 2026 is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I cannot say enough good things about this book. It is absolutely incredible. It touched something in me. I haven't cried so hard and so much reading a book in quite a while, and I highly recommend giving it a try. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you have read any of the books that I talked about, please leave me some spoiler-free thoughts down below. I love talking with people about books. And as always, everyone, please be safe. Bye-bye.